the origin of every adventure, there is often a story of childhood.
My father wanted me to pursue higher studies, in particular business studies, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be a sailor. So when I was 17, he found out that I wanted to be a sailor, and I ran away from home and left a note on my pillow saying that I was leaving, that I wanted to be a sailor, and that I was sailing on a Maltese cargo ship.
Charles Cladden, one of Brittany's most respected sailors, tells the story of his life from the very beginnings of his adventures at sea.
My father didn't get excited and said quite sensibly, "Okay, I realize that you want to be a sailor. If you like it and that's really what you want to do." So I said, "Yes, Dad. You can see there's no question of me going back to school. I want to go to sea right now." He said, "Listen, I'll make a deal with you. I'll agree, but in that case, I want you to become a captain."
And captain is what Carlos became. And not just any captain, because he now commands the crew of an ocean tug, the most powerful on the French coast. It's the month of February, and it's 6 in the morning. A violent storm is heading towards Cape Brittany. The Abeille-Bourbon, the Bourbon Bee, the barometer of the city of Brest, takes to the sea. On the bridge, concentration is intense. They're listening for the slightest radio signal. Well, now we've got 40, 42 knots blowing. Yes, Abeille.
Okay, I think we're out of trouble with the wind change and we can make way. The wind has turned northwest, we've got 42 knots gusting to 54, and it's forecast to rise, so we're going to have to 70, 75-mile winds. Actually, our job is to intervene between the incident, what may be an incident, and the accident itself. The accident is a ship that has structural damage, for example, something like that. We'll try to take it somewhere and see how we can limit the consequences of the accident. There we've just heard, okay, there are still people out, so that's why the maritime authorities keep us on weather watch here in Ushant.
Nous maintient en alerte météo ici sur Ouessant.
But it's soon impossible to remain at anchor in Stiff Bay on Ushant. The wind has turned, and we must avoid the risk of being driven onto the cliffs. The Abeille-Bourbon has to be operational in case of an emergency, so she puts out to sea in the direction of the Ushant fairway.
Why is this a dangerous place? Because we have winds that are coming from the northwest, from the west onto Rouen, and we can see that these winds will drive the ships towards the coast, whatever the direction. That's why it's so dangerous. Plus, there's the effect of the current, a very strong current. So when we have winds against the current, we can get a big increase in the size of the waves here.
Carlos talks about waves, but they look more like mountains of water. This captain and his crew have no need to prove their courage. For years now, they have been braving tempestuous seas to go to the aid of ships in distress. Usually it's Charles who takes the lead. But each of the sailors on board knows his role by heart. Jean-Romain, the ship's second officer, is one of the youngest recruits, but he's already experienced some memorable salvage operations. Well, when we get there, the aim is to go to the front of the ship with the crew, who'll be made available to help us, to pass the tow line as best as possible. With the crew of a ship in distress, I think, well, I get the impression that when they see us coming, they see our arrival as a sort of rescue, because they're so distraught. Sometimes they've already been drifting for several hours in bad weather. They have no means of controlling their ship, and they're rolling from side to side. Well, that's exhausting, so they don't necessarily have a very high morale. Oh, I think that when they see us arrive, it's a bit of a relief, because they can say to themselves, oh, at last they're come to fetch us, they're come to pick us up and take care of us.
The thing is that you're thrust right into action, into operation. But sometimes there can be dead periods. I think of when we did the Abeille-Bourbon Sun. Same thing. I was recalled, and well, the Abeille-Bourbon Sun is a ship loaded with chemical products. And the chemists that we consult at the crisis center with the Maritime Authority said, be careful. 3 chemists tell us there may be a risk of explosion if the boat runs around. I start thinking and thinking and thinking, and I tell myself, if I go like this, I've had it. And then I remembered a thing that my grandfather used to say. He used to say, if you're scared, it was a thing for kids, you have to learn to walk in your fear. And quite stupidly, like in a hospital, I practically go into a catatonic state. And I got up and I started walking, and I kept repeating with this image in my mind, walk in my fear, walk in my fear.
During an intervention on the open sea, there is also the attraction of the financial premium for the salvage of a freighter or a container ship. But what really drives these extraordinary seamen is a sense of solidarity amongst sailors. Behind the salvage of these ships lies a whole organization. We're heading for one of the Navy's most secret locations. We thread our way along a maze of corridors in the company of Captain Yves Postek. After several minutes' walk, we enter the COM, the nation's operational center. Well, these are quite exceptional sailors, hardened, courageous, because, well, after all, they face extremely hostile weather conditions, and they're under the command of a captain who has a rare knowledge of salvage operations. The captain of a ship wants to delay taking a tow till the last possible minute, because he knows it's going to cost him money. He will be accountable for it to his owner. And it's precisely for that reason that the maritime prefect has the power to act. He can order the captain of a ship to take a tow because because his ship constitutes a danger for our coast, an immediate danger. Well, the wind's going to keep up all night. No, we'll see tomorrow where we position you.
Yeah, okay, no problem. All right, okay, thanks. Goodbye.
The Ushant Fairway, the territory of the Abeille-Bourbon, is a veritable maritime highway. 150 vessels pass through every day, and they're not little ones. Container ships, tankers, or chemical carriers. You have to be ready for every emergency, so practice is non-stop.
The goal is to be prepared when required. Okay, we prefer it if nothing happens, like everybody else. But it's obvious that the fact that we practice, well, in the end, when we find ourselves in conditions that can sometimes be quite exceptional, which has already happened, it allows you to get rid of a large part of the stress because you fall back on professional practices. The sea is always stronger. You must always keep that in mind. This means that we, for example, we know how to smash the boat in half an hour. That's certain. So from the time we're going to intervene, the aim is always to find the limit, the acceptable risk, so as not to lose time in the operation. To do things while, at the same time, avoiding sustaining any damage to ourselves that might compromise the operation as a whole.
Find the limit, walk over your fear, and react quickly, very quickly. The salvagers on the Abeille-Bourbon know that each scenario is different, and that at the end of the tow line, a number of lives are at stake. It's a moment when you're very, very close to the ship in distress. You may be, a dozen or 15 yards from its bulb. So it's not easy to aim either, because there's the wind. The ship's moving around. Well, sometimes the ship in distress is very high compared to us. Well, so all that makes aiming the rocket more difficult. While some crew are busy on the rear deck, other crew are on alert in the machine room, the belly of the bee. We're in the nerve center of the tug. The success of a salvage operation depends not only on the experience of the captain, but also on the power of its engines. During operations, the engineers are often under great pressure.
Okay, Bridge, the engines are ready. You can see the two screws that are used to drive us, but also to maneuver while towing. And above all, something you don't have on other ships, the two rear thrusters here. Two bow thrusters which are actually used to hold the ship in position while we take up the tow. It gives us... we have 1,200 horsepower on each thruster, so twice that at the front, 800 horsepower at the stern. And as far as holding the ship's position is concerned, close to the ship needing assistance, we have practically the best equipment for positioning.
And yet, despite the reliability of the engines, the danger is there just a few yards away. It's January the 18th, 2007, and the Napoli, whose hull is split, is beginning to pitch and toss dangerously.
I admit that when I arrived on the Super Hornet, we were the first there. When I got up there, I saw the broken ship. My first reaction was to think, we're turning round, we're not staying here, because we didn't know what to do. We could see that the ship was going to break up. There was a storm blowing, so it was risky being on board. However, we do one of those jobs where you have to try to find a way, try to do something. We're faced with the accident. So in this case, you have to try to find the least bad compromise in what you can do. So as I always say, in this type of situation, it looks like a hopeless situation, we have to go for it, try to do something.
The tow cable finally snaps with the violent tugging and jerking. it's impossible to maneuver the container ship. After drifting for several days, the Napoli finally ran aground on a beach in Cornwall, England. For the French and English salvage teams, this operation is not a happy memory.
The profession of salvager is a ruminant profession. It's like cows. That means that after each operation you think, what could we have done better? There's so much pressure at the moment of the operation that later you experience a little crisis of compensation. There's the funk, the retrospective fear that that's there, it comes. There's a load of things, and that, how can I put it? You get used to it. Sometimes every operation, it's things that pile up. You don't get used to that. The only thing you learn with time is that it passes.